In this video, we're going to do an NDB approach in the CJ4 Working Title Mod. This is the NDB runway 34 to, however you say the name of that place, Alaska. First thing we need to do is go to the tune page. On the tune page, you can see in the bottom left corner ADF, the frequency is 281. You need to put the frequency there. Next, we need to pull up the bearing pointer. So to do that, go to PFD menu, scroll down, and go to bearing source. Then push the select knob, then scroll down to ADF 1. And you should see the cyan needle come up on the PFD. To get rid of the menu box, you can press PFD menu or you can press escape until it goes away. So remember, the ADF needle is always going to point at the station. It's pointing directly at it. You can look at the tail of it over on the MFD and you can see it's pointing to about 010. So we're northeast of the NDB. So right now we're just flying directly to the NDB. We're just going to keep that needle pointing straight up and down. When we pass the station, we're going to know when we pass the station when the needle flips around and points the opposite direction. You can also see the pink FMS course that you normally see on that display. That's not giving us any accurate information right now that we need to do this approach with. And if I ever have to do an approach like this in real life, what I typically do is select the source to VOR, and then I will put the course perpendicular to the final approach course, just so the needle's not in the way. And since this is a timed approach, meaning we're going to hit the fix, we're going to fly outbound for a set amount of minutes. We're going to do the procedure turn for a set amount of time. I'm holding a constant airspeed, or attempting to hold a constant airspeed of 180 knots with flaps at 15. And as we approach the station, you can see on the chart on the left, on the Navigraph chart, and there on the PFD, the needle flipped, station passage has occurred. And once that happens, reach up and start your time. That's the ET button up here above the PFD. And you can see down in the bottom left corner of the PFD, the elapsed time is running. And I'm going to go outbound for 1 minute and 30 seconds. At our current speed, we're doing a little over 3 miles per minute. We can see on the approach plate here, remain within 10 nautical miles. So the outbound course is 174 degrees. We're currently on about 176, so I've pulled the tail of the needle to the left by turning to the left to bring it over to 174. Once we get it on 174, we'll make a right turn back as we're doing now to a 174 heading. Then we may need to adjust left or right based on wind. Now that our heading's figured out, the next thing we're watching for is the time. The elapsed time right now is at 59 seconds. When it gets to a minute and a half, we'll make a right turn to 219 and start our procedure turn outbound. You can also see on the chart, once we cross the NDB at 5,500 feet, or you can be higher, but once you cross it, you can come down to 4,400 feet, which is what we're doing right now. The autopilot cannot fly an ADF needle, so we're going to be in heading mode the whole time, and we have to tell the airplane which way to turn to get the needle where we want it. Okay, there's our time. Now we're going to make that right turn to 219. This is a procedure turn outbound. We're going to fly this heading for 30 seconds. Once we roll wings level, we'll start our timer. There we're rolling wings level. You have to press the elapsed time button to reset it, and then press it again to start it. And in an airplane at these speeds, we'll go outbound for 30 seconds. Normally in a 172 or something slower, you would do a procedure turn outbound for 1 minute. But they would normally be doing a procedure turn outbound at 90 knots. But when flying outbound from a fix or on a procedure turn, there's no set amount of time. If you wanted to do 15 seconds, you could do 15. If you want to do 2 minutes, you could do 2 minutes. As long as you stay within the 10 miles, all this is doing is allowing us to turn the airplane around and go back and intercept the final approach course. And with that being said, we actually went past our time just a little bit, which is fine. So now we're making a left turn to 039, and that's our procedure turn inbound. We're also not able to descend until we are established on the final approach course. What that means, we're within 10 degrees of the final approach course heading inbound. When that happens, then we can descend down to minimums. But all we're doing is turning left 039. We do not need a time on the procedure turn inbound, and there's a reason for that. The final approach course is 354 degrees. That needle is going to point at the station. When that points at 354, we're going to turn to 354. And that is why we don't need to use time. We're waiting for the bearing pointer to reach the final approach course heading. When it does, we turn to that heading, make small adjustments left or right if needed to keep the bearing pointer on the final approach course. Now that bearing pointer is pointing at 356. That's 2 degrees off of 354. So we can descend down to 3,580 feet. So to do that, we can reach up to the altitude select knob right there, dial it down to 3,600 feet because we can't set 3,580 and we can't go below. Then press vertical speed and descend down. There's also no need to start a time on this portion of the approach because the missed approach point is the NDB. When that needle flips, that's when we go missed. But more on that up in the notes. And if you look at note number 6, successful go around, improbable if initiated past the missed approach point. Notice the bearing pointer is pointing at 356 degrees. We went 354. So I'm just making a small correction to the right, just holding a heading of 359. And we've got a little bit of wind off the left side. That little bit's going to push us over to the right and help that needle get to 354. And right there it's at 354. We can select the heading bug and move it back over to 354. But I made a mistake here. What I should have done, you can see the wind's off the left side. I should have brought that over to maybe 353 or 352 to correct for that wind. Another thing we have on an approach normally, if doing an ILS, we know when to put the gear down based on where we're at on the glide slope, or we have a distance. This one we don't have a distance. So when you turn final, you can select gear down and full flaps. When doing an approach like this one, you would also want to keep your speed back, so maybe rough plus 10 maximum, because when you get to the minimum descent altitude and actually see the runway, from there to the runway in this case, you have to lose 2,000 feet to get down. So if we break out 2 miles from the airport, 120 knots, it's 2 miles a minute. We would only have 1 minute to get down to the runway, so we would have to descend at 2,000 feet per minute. But now that we're past minimums, we've looked up, we can see the runway, and we can actually see that it's on a slope. And there's a note for that here too. Number 1, caution, runway surrounded by mountains, runway located on a slope of 3,236 foot mountain. This runway does slope uphill. It actually has a slope of 4.8%. Most jet aircraft like this one have a limit of plus or minus 2%. And what that slope means for this one, the approach end down to the departure end is actually a 200-foot rise. And if you need more practice or want more instruction on flying ADF needles, I do have a video on flying this style ADF needle and also the standalone with the movable card ADF needle. And I will put a link to both of those in the description. Oh, one more thing with the slope. When we touch down, watch the vertical speed. It's still going to be climbing as we roll out and come to a stop. And as always, thank you for watching.